Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 145. We are back this week. We are moving towards that third year anniversary. Well, it's kind of around the third year anniversary when we get to the 150 episodes. We are moving towards that. And today we have all three hosts with us. And we also have, we've got another run of guests coming up. So I think we had a run of about 5 weeks of guests. And then the last 2 weeks, you've just had the hosts with you, and now we're just kind of about to hit another run of guests, and we're joined by a fantastic guest this week. But before I introduce you to him, we will just check in with the usual hosts and see how they're getting on. So, Mr. Peter Lant, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to see that on this episode there is more hair, which is great because some of the episodes are lacking quite a lot of hair. You know what I mean? I've got the hair and the beard. James has got one bit. Paul's got none of it. So our guest is bringing it all, and I love it.
He's got the head hair and the beard hair.
Yes.
You haven't seen my chest.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah. Very right. Yes. Yes, we are. Yeah, we've had a few people with not much hair on, haven't we? We had John Engham a few weeks back.
Yeah.
How
was that? How was that, by the way, at the weekend?
Oh, it was a brilliant weekend. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I won't talk too. I mean, maybe when we do another talk, when it's the three of us, we can do a bit of a debrief on that. But yeah, the flexible steel was fantastic. The body weight certification was great. I mean, we had people fly in to Chelmsford from Singapore, Israel.
Wow.
We had 2 from Holland, Belgium, 2 from Ireland. Obviously, John flew over from North Dakota in the States. I picked him up from Heathrow on the Thursday. No, it was brilliant. And I recerted my SFB. I didn't get my double body weight deadlift, which is another story for another day. But I've kind of been talking to Paul about that. And I think I probably peaked at the start of the week. He gave me something quite tough, and my CNS was my central nervous system, I think, was a bit fried from that. And it was just a really busy weekend. And I went for the deadlift on the Sunday morning after a really long Friday, a really long Saturday, and went in, and it just wasn't there.
Those weekends always take it out of me. I don't know about you, but by the end of them, I'm just like, I can just about function. And you don't even do loads and loads of stuff. It's just the amount of information that gets.
Yeah, but even hosting, I was there on the Friday, I was there from 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. And then went straight out to dinner with kind of Claire and John and things. And the Saturday I was there from, I think, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. straight out to dinner. And then the Sunday I was back in there at 7 a.m. So yeah, it just wasn't there, but learnt from it. And I was very close, but next time it will be a bit more, Paul said, right, I've learned something about the programming with you and all the rest of it. So we'll move forward and I will get it down the line. Anyway, Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you doing?
I think I've already got our 3-year anniversary gift, which is leather, which is basically what I'm made of, old leather, tough and everything. But 3 years. Wow. I didn't realize it was that long. It was the pandemic, wasn't it?
It was middle of that. Yeah, or the start of that. Sorry, when we first recorded. So no, that's great. So this week we are joined by Chris Branch. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Chris, I've known Chris for a number of years, or being aware of Chris, and we've met a number of times over the years, but probably, I don't know, I'll put a number on it and say 5-ish years.
Yeah.
Maybe around 5-ish years. And Chris is I'll say we're going to go into, we talk in a lot more depth around different things, but Chris is, I suppose you could say, an osteopath by trade, and runs his own business called Forte Physical Health. But Chris is someone I've known for about 5 years, who I follow him on social media as well. His Instagram is fantastic. And he's someone who I certainly think of as, he's a deep thinker. He's a thoughtful person. He's fully immersed in all elements really of health and fitness and well-being, and someone who I've wanted to get on the podcast for a while. And the other week I just decided, well, I'll ping a message and we'll see if we can set it up, and we've managed to. So I'm really glad to have Chris on the podcast this week. So Chris, I mean, we had someone, we often have people on the podcast who I kind of quote unquote know, but then when we actually start sitting down and having a full-on sort of hour discussion, I find out lots of things that I didn't know about the guest, and we go down lots of different rabbit holes and things. So I suppose initially, just for our listeners, can you give us a bit of a background into yourself, in terms of your journey so far within health, fitness, wellness, therapy, your business, and kind of what's got you to where you are now, and what you're working on now as well. And we can kind of just dip in and ask questions on the way, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So I would say I was a slight anomaly as a kid, and I wanted to be an osteopath when I was 13 years old, where most 13-year-olds haven't even heard of osteopathy. But going beyond that, way back, literally as far back as my memory goes, I have been interested in what it means to be healthy. And I'm not joking there. About four years old, I remember kind of wondering what it means to be healthy. When I was 6 or 7, we had to write in our class what we wanted to get out of life. And I said, I want to live to 100. And I'm going to do 100 setups and 100 press ups every day to achieve it, because I thought that's what you needed to do to live to 100. And all through kind of childhood and adolescence, I was thinking mostly about wanting to understand the human body. But then I had this other innate feeling as a young person, which was that I wanted to use my hands, and I didn't want to prescribe medicines. My parents were healthy. My mum was an elite runner, and I remember often having kind of supplements around. There was Patrick Holford was kind of a nutrition model at the time, which has probably been blown out the water now. But we had supplements all around the house all the time, and it just implanted this idea in my mind that you can look after yourself. There's a good way to be healthy. You don't need medicines to achieve health. So prior to wanting to be an osteopath, I actually wanted to be a physio, and I up until the age of 13, I'd never heard of osteopathy. And then my mum went to see an osteopath with a bad back, and I saw how he worked, which was quite an old school, very strong, manipulative way of treating, which I don't use at all anymore. But as a 13-year-old, I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and that's what I want to do. So at that age, I literally just fell in love with wanting to be an osteopath. And the way I see it now, though, because from there you have to go through your GCSEs and A levels and do a degree. But once you come out as an osteopath, I just see it as a platform in the same way that being a personal trainer or a physio or a chiro, they're really just platforms to engage with people to try and help them in your way. And each practitioner or professional will have more of a role at certain times, and with my patients, I'm really trying to fill the gap between being in pain to being able to look after themselves with an active and healthy lifestyle. And I think we can, as osteopaths, can facilitate and accelerate people through that transition from a pain point to then getting them back to a life where they can actually just look after themselves, and then pass them on to you guys mostly, or just teach them how to look after themselves. But we're filling that gap, and hopefully while we're working with them hands-on, we're also educating them and inspiring them to take on a few healthy habits. We start with the general principle that the body can heal itself. So if someone's in my clinic, why has it healed itself? And hands-on work can accelerate things. And then education and inspiration maintains the changes that we create in the clinic. That's our working model.
Mm. And the clinic that you have in Chelmsford in Essex, you work with a number of other therapists now, I believe, within that clinic. Is the demand obviously high for, because you've got somewhere right in the middle of the town, you know, the demand high for the kind of care and the kind of service that you give at the moment?
Yeah, we're really busy, and there are a few reasons why I think we're so busy. We've been much busier since COVID, and I think part of that is that the NHS is really struggling. And then the other reason I think we're so busy is people are just so much more interested in health and fitness, and we're a facilitation to that. So the example I give is, how do people spend their money? And 20 years ago, a CEO would have been a pinstriped fat cat in the city, spending money on boats and cars. And now the CEO in the city is super lean, running ultra marathons and doing Ironmans, and their money is spent on a 10 grand road bike. And if they can't perform, or if pain is getting them in their way, and obviously that's just one example, but even just general people, non-CEO people, we have so much of a better understanding about how to be well and how to move and how to look after ourselves. And sometimes our body gets in the way, and that's where we come in. So we're that nice little stepping stone of people having a desire to be healthy. There's so much more now in the public consciousness about looking after ourselves, but sometimes pain and injury just stifles people. So yeah, we're very busy, and there is high demand. We're still growing. We've been in that location 7 years, and we're still steadily growing. We've got a little bit more capacity to fill in the building, and I think we'll keep growing until we're completely full.
So go on, Paul.
Have the kind of injuries changed over the years? Are the kind of things you're seeing the average client go through? Has that changed? As you know, as you say, that the people's priorities have changed. Have the kind of issues you've been seeing changed alongside that?
The only big shift I've noticed is since more people are working from home. So up until COVID, I would have said no. Despite treating lots of people who enjoy the gym and enjoy running and enjoy being active, we actually don't treat a ton of sports injuries. We occasionally see someone who's busted their knee on the football field, but generally it's just normal people who happen to like being active, but have just hurt themselves with normal living. The only big shift in the patterns we see is when people work from home more. And if people don't already have one, I tell them to go, if they're working from home regularly, I tell them to go and get a step counter, just some sort of fitness watch. And many people are doing less than 2,000 steps a day when they're working from home. And they're just not popping out for a coffee. They're not walking to see their colleague. Everything's on Teams call. And that really is harming people. And so many of my patients, these exact same people who are doing 2,000 steps a day, they'll hurt themselves doing something. So they'll come and blame, they'll come into the clinic and blame the thing that they were doing. So I have to keep having this conversation that it's the not doing that primes their body to be injured. And yes, they injured themselves doing something, but it's because they've become what I call an Olympic sitter. It's like they've trained their whole life to become the best sitter they can be. And their body is very well conditioned to sitting, which means they're suddenly not very well conditioned to putting something in the dishwasher or taking something out of the car or going to the gym and trying to press overhead. It's the not doing that really is the problem, and then they hurt themselves doing something.
I had the opposite effect when I was doing a long car journey up to Scotland, because I hadn't driven that long in many. It was like a 9-hour journey. I took it slowly. I just found that it was so uncomfortable being in the car because I just wasn't used to sitting in that position. So the only thing, I got out and went and did mobility at the service stations. But I thought the only way you can actually get good at this is actually to start becoming adapted to the chair. That's the only way you can get away from feeling awful while you're doing it. So yeah, I wasn't very adapted to it.
I'm like you. I'm the same. I'm active in my job, active just in my hobbies and lifestyle. So when I'm on a course or if I have to go for a long drive, I'm exactly the same. I hate it. But that's a perfect example where the body does adapt to everything you do, whether that's positive or negative. And so many people have adapted brilliantly to sitting, but then that becomes a problem with the other things they want to do in their life.
So in terms of, Chris, your own practice, your own lifestyle, like you said, you were always really interested or obsessed with health and longevity and, like you said, living to 100 and things like that. And I obviously follow you on Instagram. Like I said, I've spoken to you before, so I see some of the things you do and some of the kind of activities that you take part in. What does life look like for you in terms of your levels of activity and your part? Like you said, you have active pastimes and things like that. What is life like for you?
So I'm currently training for a few ultra marathons. I've got my first 100-mile race in a couple of weeks. So I've done a very big and relatively hard block getting ready for this training. So over this race, I kind of think of my body like a farm, and I think of the crop rotation principle. So recently I've done this big block of running 6 days a week. Life has also been quite hectic, and the clinic's been busy, had a few things going on there. So I haven't quite had as much strength training as I would like in it. So I feel very focused on, I've just had to do what I've had to do to be able to achieve these ultra marathons. Once I've got the 100 out the way, I'm going to do my crop rotation. I'm going to let that field rest for a while, and then I'm going to get back into strength training. So between now and between the 100 and Christmas, I'm going to do a big strength block and start to rebuild some of my strength. And the way I think about it is, when you put a good effort into a particular discipline or a particular area of fitness, you'll raise your baseline. Even if you don't continue it, you'll raise your baseline. So I've worked very hard for the last 6 months on raising my aerobic base and improving my tissue resilience in my connective tissues and tendons and ligaments. And although I won't be running to the same volume once the 100's done, I'll maintain some of that. And then I would like to do other ultras next year. So I'll get back into a block, and I won't quite be starting from square one. I'll be starting from a higher baseline. So I'll be able to jump back in a bit quicker. In an ideal world, if I had a bit more time in my week, I'd be doing strength training and aerobic based training at the same time to a higher degree with the strength. But there's only so much time in the week, so that's neglected a little bit. Yeah, that's my next goal.
So where did the goal of the 100 miles come from? Obviously, it's not just something you decide to go from nothing to, I'm going to run 100 miles. Have you progressed up to this, through various distances and various races to take you up to that? Or did you start with the thing in mind, I want to be able to run 100 miles, and then you've systematically kind of moved towards that through training and everything else?
Well, I first heard about crazy people running 100 miles probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And it kind of landed in my brain as like, that sounds to me like an interesting thing. That interests me for some reason. But then I put it on the back burner for 5-6 years. And actually during that time, with osteopathy and helping patients, I actually started to think, why on earth would you want to do that? Even though it intrigued me, it also made me think, why would you put your body through it? It's just not worth it. You can be healthy and feel well, and you can enjoy things at a lower level without putting yourself at risk. That was my feeling during the 7 years, which I've now changed my mind on. And the thing that changed my mind on it was when I was 26, I ran 26 miles on my 26th birthday without any training. And it was very silly. I don't recommend that to anyone, but I could do it. And 10 years went by, and I wasn't doing any running whatsoever. And then I got an email reminding me that I'm signed up to the Chelmsford Half Marathon in 4 weeks' time. And I hadn't been doing any running. I was like, oh gosh, I've got to get ready for this half. And I started running a few days a week just to prepare myself for the half marathon. And one of these runs was 2 days before my 36th birthday. And this little voice in my head said, oh, do you remember that time you ran 26 miles on your 26th birthday? Well, you're going to be 36 in a couple of days. Do you think you could run 36 miles? And this voice just couldn't get out of my head. So 2 days later, I'd literally been doing 2 weeks of running, training for a half marathon. I then ran 36 miles on my 36th birthday. And what baffled me was that I could do it. and I knew enough about cardio training to know that don't go beyond zone 2. If you can stay in zone 2 in your cardiovascular zone, you might be able to pull this off. So I stayed in zone 2. I nose breathed all the way around. And to my absolute amazement, I could run 36 miles with 2 weeks of training. And what I noticed about it was that actually I felt fine because the volume was high, but the intensity was low. It wasn't as damaging as I was expecting. And also it felt like a wonderful adventure. So that's how I see these now. I don't think of them as races. I see them as wonderful adventures. And I want to be fit enough and strong enough and well enough to have adventures, to make memories. And with the right conditioning, this is where I feel like I was wrong in those 5 years between hearing about 100 miles and then actually training to do one. Conditioning is everything. Where people go wrong is they, like I nearly did, just quickly sign up to a half marathon and try and smash it as hard as they can without enough training. But if you're consistent and you spend enough time and you follow a plan, I've bought plans from experts. I'm an expert in something, but I'm not an expert in writing a plan to train for an ultra. So I've bought plans online. If you follow that plan and stick to it, your cardiovascular system, your connective tissue system, everything conditions, and hopefully you can do these things safely. And so far I've run 3 ultras with no injuries, and I'm feeling really strong for the 100. So that's how I ended up here, and how I've actually changed my mind about certain things. And I think it's safer than I initially thought, as long as you're consistent and don't make too many big jumps with how much you're doing.
I was just going to ask, I've grabbed this. We haven't used this for a while. This is the acronym hammer that I pull out sometimes when I need something explained. And I just thought, for the sake of, or for the benefit of the listeners, you mentioned zone 2 cardio there. Can you I don't think we've actually had a conversation around this on the podcast before. Can you just explain what you mean by zone 2 for the listeners? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So broadly speaking, we categorize the heart rate zones into 5. So zone 1 is very low intensity walking. Zone 2 is still relatively low intensity. When in zone 2, you should be able to speak in full sentences, breathe through your nose. That's kind of a good measure of being in zone 2. And then going beyond that, you start to get more out of breath. Zone 4 is pretty hard work, but someone who's conditioned, as in has been running or cycling for a while, someone whose condition could maintain zone 4 for up to an hour. And then zone 5 works between, say, being able to do a hard kind of 10, 15 minutes of work all the way up to a sprint. Now, the reason this matters is zone 1 and zone 2 are almost exclusively your aerobic system, and zones 3 and beyond have a blend between your aerobic and your anaerobic system. So when we talk about aerobic and anaerobic, what we're talking about is the metabolic pathways that deliver energy to your muscles. And basically, how do your muscles get energy? Now, at slower paces, we use the aerobic system, which is just a chemical reaction that uses oxygen, meaning you can breathe your way into giving your muscles energy. And then when we use the anaerobic system, we need energy a little bit faster, and we can no longer breathe our way with it. So we have to use a different metabolic pathway, and that delivers energy quicker, but it has a byproduct of creating lactic acid. So when I tried to run the 36 miles on my 36th birthday, I knew that I really shouldn't be trying to create lactic acid. So I just nose breathed the whole way, made sure I was in zone 2. And that amazingly got me around. Just as a little analogy to help understand kind of the aerobic and the anaerobic systems, I think of it like a car with an engine and a turbo. So we can drive a certain speed with just the engine, and then the turbos can kick in because we need speed faster. Now, when I'm doing my ultramarathon training, I'm spending a lot of time in my training targeting very specifically the engine, the zone 1, zone 2 elements of my cardio metabolism. And the analogy I use is, if you had a car that had a 1 liter engine and a turbo, but then you trained the car and it then had a 3 liter engine plus a turbo, the 3 liter engine is obviously going to be the faster car. So when I got into my ultramarathon training, I could only run about 10.5 minutes per mile in zone 2. And now with the right conditioning and training, I can run a sub 8-minute mile in zone 2. So by definition, zone 2 should feel easy. It's low intensity by the definition of you're keeping your heart rate low. So I find sub 8-minute miles very easy, whereas I used to find 10-minute miles very easy. So I've trained my engine And now I also train the turbos. So when you put the turbos on, you can run faster. So this is one of those really counterintuitive things in cardio training, that slower training makes you faster. And to spend time in zone 2, which feels slow, I always say to people, when you get into it, if you've never heard of this style of training, it should feel embarrassingly slow. People will overtake you. You know you can run faster, but you're going to hold yourself back. You running or cycling or swimming embarrassingly slow, targeting zone 2, that's increasing your engine, and then the turbos are there when you need them.
We had Phil Maffetone on.
Oh, right. Well, I use the Maffetone formula.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask about the Maffetone formula because
we've got him back.
We've got him coming back, have we?
Yeah, we've got him coming back. I was talking to him a few days ago. I say talking to him, I was emailing him.
Brilliant.
Just having a chat with him.
Yeah, just me and Phil.
You and Phil. No, but yeah, so that's great, because I always find it, because when I started, I think it was probably what was it? Primal Blueprint, I think. Mark Sissons talks about this kind of training, doesn't it? And yeah, you start trying to do, and the Maffetone formula, is it 170 minus age?
180.
So 180 minus your age, yeah.
And then you start, like you say, you start trying to do that, and it's like you almost go out and you're a little bit embarrassed. You think, I hope people don't think this is as fast as I can run. I'm literally like running like not much faster than I can walk, to begin with, like you say. But it's very much, it's kind of almost like the Paul McElroy comfort zone expansion, isn't it? With strength training, whereby you're really, like you say, and some people they'll look at something like a Kipchoge or something like that, and his zone 2 would probably be still running, I don't know, sub 6 minute miles.
Oh yeah, it's well below 6. So elite runners actually have to do their base training in zone 1, not because zone 2 is too stressful on the cardio system, but because it's too stressful on the mechanical system. For them, their zone 2 is still like low 5s, which is just insane. And if they do that all the time, eventually their ligaments and tendons will just say no thanks. So they actually do quite a high volume in zone 1, whereas us mere mortals can get away with zone 2, because for most of us, when we get into it, it's 11 minutes, 10 minutes, 9 minutes per mile.
I think that's something that's so interesting, because people forget about aerobic speed. They think about slow twitch and fast twitch. And they think in order to run slow, you have to be slow. But, I remember in Phil Maffetone's book, he talks about Mark Allen hitting around about 5 30-minute miles in his aerobic zone. So at a conversational, pace, that's insane speed. And like you say, and particularly with cyclists, because the gravitational effects on when you're on a bike are much lower than when you're running, your zone 2 could be brutal, and being able to stay in your zone 2 for a prolonged period of time is incredibly tough on a bike, because you're so aerobically fit that, like you say, the mechanical stress is huge.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because some people, when they start running slowly, consciously in this zone 2, and maybe using the Maffetone formula, they feel like it's like, I suppose there is this, you're almost stepping, like you say, you're running slowly to go fast, or you're stepping back and you're almost stripping back and starting again. And when I started training with Paul McElroy strength wise, the weights he gave me to start lifting were easy, were really easy, but it gradually you expand the comfort zone, and then you lift weights that previously were hard and now they feel easy, in the same way that, like you say, you're running at, say, sub 8 minute mile pace, and it feels like it used to feel running sub 10 minute mile pace, and because you've expanded that's fascinating. And so what's I know ultra running, if you like, is that's officially, is that any distance further than a marathon?
Yep. Yeah. Any distance, yeah. That the first races that people generally organize are over 30 miles. So kind of a 50K would be an entry level ultra, but that is the definition. Anything longer than a marathon.
So what's the furthest that you have ran in in one event or one race or one training run or whatever up to this point?
Only 50 miles, so I'm going to double it. So
only 50 miles.
Yeah, they say. Well, I say only relative to 100.
Yeah, relative.
So,
to 100. Yeah.
So
I've got a question. How do you manage? So thinking of it strength wise with the Paul McElroy stuff, yeah, any rep max goes up. So with 20, say you're pressing 20 kilo bell above your head, which for me would be relatively easy. If you can do 10 sets of 10, great. But if you turn that into 10 sets of 20, then everything above that goes up, right? So this is what we're talking about here with the zone 2 training. But if you've only ever ran 50 miles before, how do you manage? Because with strength training, you then you could go for a 1 rep max and say, I'm either going to get it or not. Your 1 rep max in running world is the distance. So it's not like a one shot and don't get it. So how do you manage what happens in the latter part where you've never been before? Do you get what I mean? Because in a strength thing, it's like you go for it and it either goes or not, and it's over in an instant. With this, it's prolonged, so it becomes more of a lot about mindset as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I'm so intrigued by it as a concept. It is a mindset thing. So what people say is, if you can run 50, you can run 100. Yeah. And the difference is
that sounds so easy, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's like, all right, well, see you later.
I'm just trying to think where to bounce. I think there are 2 concepts here. One is this is a theory. It's not kind of set in stone. There are some flaws in it, but there's something known as the central governor theory, which is a theory. It will probably be disproven fairly soon, or at least refined. But the idea behind it, as a broad picture, is our brain's primary role is it's a survival tool. So it is constantly getting feedback from our body, and then it's regulating us via our behaviors. And the way it regulates us via our behaviors is our thoughts and symptoms. So when you run 50 miles, it hurts, and it hurts for everybody. It hurts for elite people. And some of those symptoms, they're not the truth. They're not real. They're not damage. They're just your brain, your central governor is just going, oh, I'm not sure about Chris running for such a long time. I think I'm going to slow him down and make him want to stop. I'm going to make him want to stop by making his legs hurt. And so then you start to feel these symptoms, and all these thoughts start going through your mind, like, oh, I can't keep going. I can't go on. But all of it is an illusion. And what the difference between 50 and 100 is all of that will be magnified. I'm expecting it to hurt more, but actually I'm not expecting myself to come out the other side damaged. I'm just, I know it's going to be a harder experience. So the way I'm starting to think about it, having listened to podcasts and read books and watched a million YouTube videos, is I can confidently say I could run 80 miles tomorrow. And I think of that as a physical challenge. My legs can carry me 80 miles as a physical. That's where my conditioning is at. In the time of day, I'm probably going to be hitting 80 miles in the race at about midnight. So at midnight, when I've run 80 miles, when every single cell in my body is saying, go to bed, I'm going to have to then run another 20. And that's where it becomes a mental game. And that is the thing that intrigues me, because there are really no hiding spaces left. And you're in the dark, all you've got is the tunnel of your head torch on the path, and you've got your thoughts and your central governor really trying to stop you, and you just have to choose to keep going. And that for me is what intrigues me. Although I'm really interested in health, I wouldn't necessarily say this is what you need to do to be healthy. I almost see this as a spiritual type practice where I'm trying to do something really hard. I've put in a lot of consistent effort over a long period of time. It's going to be a delayed gratification if I can achieve it. And in the race, you find out who you are. And am I going to be the person that listens to the central governor and go, oh, my foot hurts, I'm going to give up? Or am I going to go, I'm just going to keep trying to go forward? I actually don't know yet. We'll find out in a couple of weeks, but that's really what intrigues me.
I think we don't necessarily want to go anywhere near religion on this podcast, but I think by that last 20 miles, you'll probably be seeing God, won't you? It's in some form.
Potentially.
There's a great story in Born to Run, the book, about one of the ultra runners called, I think his surname's Jurek, Scott Jurek.
Scott. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and apparently it's one of his first races. I don't know if it's the what's it one, the one in the desert. And he's
is it or something?
no, I think it's in
Badwater?
Leadville.
Oh, Leadville.
Badwater,
Mhm.
one of those two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's just lying face down at some point in the race, not moving for a certain amount of time, and people are just worrying whether or not he's going to even get up. And you know, he looks almost dead, and then something clicks in his head, and he gets up and wins the entire event. And it's all down to his mind. His body obviously was going through that state where it's saying, "Now, that you know, you got to stop now. This isn't right." And then I think a lot of these people who, particularly endurance, I think it's something about endurance, is that ability to probably ignore, but at the same time, perhaps see beyond the limitations of the body. And I think it's a skill, isn't it? It's a skill that you can develop, that you can tap into through training, but nothing
Correct.
quite gets you right. I mean, it really sets the elite performers apart is whether you can do it in practice under very high levels of stress, you know.
It is something you develop, though. Someone actually said to me the other day, she's been following me on Instagram. She said, "Oh, you're doing so well, and you seem fit." And I was like, "Well, I really hope I'm fit, because I kind of have to be to run 100 miles." And she said, "No, but you're so mentally strong." And I was like, it's interesting that she thought that, because I don't feel it in my head, but on reflection, that is absolutely something that develops the more things you do, and it is you're gradually increasing you're gradually stretching that zone, aren't you?
I was gonna ask a question on that when Paul was talking. Then I was thinking, because I've looked into, you know, kind of building resilience, and you can build resilience in your body by lifting weights now, but building mental resilience, because your brain doesn't like any change, whether good or bad. It wants to keep you where you are, doesn't it? It's like, no, I'm staying here, because any change is dangerous. That's danger. And it doesn't matter if it's good change or bad change. You know, you get a promotion at work, say, and your brain will be like, are you going to be good enough for this? Are you going to be able to do it? And then all these kind of things creep in. So it doesn't matter in the situation. So I was thinking, how is this? Because obviously it's building mental resilience, which is what you've just kind of mentioned there, but how does it feed back into the rest of your life, like everything else that you do? Do you know what I mean? Does it give you more confidence to do things that, because you can go out and just run 100 miles without?
It really does.
Thinking about it, but
yeah, I think that comes through your training as well. So all big events where you really push yourself, they come with what I call an afterglow, and you'll have an afterglow for about 6 weeks where you feel indestructible, and everything about life is easier. But that happens to a smaller degree just in training. I run 6 days a week, and I don't want to most of the time. At the beginning of my run, I don't want to run. And I think about 80% of my runs, I don't want to go on until I'm running. And then I'm like, oh, cool, I'm running. This is fine. And there's just something about not wanting to do something and doing it and feeling good at the end that gives you confidence and carries over into the rest of your day. And I have now come to put this down as a non-negotiable. Just training is a non-negotiable. Doing things when I don't want to do them, they're a non-negotiable, because it really does carry over into the rest of your life. So I enjoy the afterglow of a big event, but I really just think training when you don't want to train is probably bigger and more important than doing random one-off big events, because it's hopefully sustainable.
I'm glad Paul mentioned Born to Run there, and I can't remember if we've spoke about that before, Chris, but I read Born to Run years ago, and I'm currently reading the Natural Born Heroes, I think, which is Chris McDougall's.
Yeah, I've read it
after Born to Run. Yeah. So so I'm currently reading that, and it is, like you say, I think physically, that this is what's going to be fantastic. I mean, it'll be great. It's 2 weeks' time, is it? You're doing the 100 miles.
Mm.
It'd be really interesting to talk to you again afterwards.
I'm happy to. That'd be great.
Just to see, because it's fascinating having this conversation now, and that feeling of, because really for anyone, I mean, I've ran about 10 marathons, I think, a long one, nothing probably. I don't think I've done one in the last 10 years. But the fact that you're going to run 4, one after the other effectively. And when you were talking, it made me think when you said that you view these kind of things as adventures, like when you said the 36 miles on your 36th birthday and so on. And it strikes me that probably this 100 miles is obviously an adventure, but it seems to me that for you, it's going to be far more of a kind of emotional, visceral, kind of spiritual almost adventure, like you say, rather than the physical, because your body, like you said, your body has the capacity to run that 100 miles, and it's really the managing of your mind, isn't it, throughout that, which is going to be, it's going to be fascinating. We had some guys on recently who did the Travis and Ted, who did the 24-hour Snowdon relay, and it was up and down Snowdon for 24 hours. But there was three of them, and they were kind of, so one would go up and down, and they would relay it. But they talked, and I watched the film they did, the Summit Mentality, of when they were doing it through the night when it was pitch black, and they just had the little head torch on, and they were, it was them on the trail on their own. And the fact that you're going to, so many questions, but how long is this going to take you? I mean, is there a time cut off, or what's your anticipation of the total duration of this 100-mile adventure?
The time cut off is 30 hours. I hope. It's really hard to tell you because I've only run 50 miles, so the wheels might fall off. But I'm hoping
I can help you with that. You just how long it took you, and then just double it.
I hope it's that. But it's probably going to be slightly longer. So it'll probably be about 23 hours. I think so. I'd love to do it in about 22. I think less than 22 is unrealistic. Under 24 is a bit of a milestone. So in the same way that sub 4, for example, is kind of a milestone in marathon running, sub 24 is a 100 marathon, a 100-mile milestone, where that's kind of my massive goal. So 23 hours would be, I think, possible, and that would be good.
Because 25 hours, I suppose, would be that's 4 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it sounds, when you say it like that, it sounds like
that would be easy for 50 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you've got to do that for 100 miles,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What I'm starting to realize with long distance ultras is it really isn't about how fast you can run. It's about how little you can slow down. And this is where the first 80 miles, there may be people, I'm really going to keep telling myself to take it steady, which is just bonkers, isn't it? 80 miles that's my warm up. Because what I really don't want to do is just get completely shattered in that final 20 miles where I have to lay on the floor and take a rest, or stay in an aid station for 40 minutes. Because if I can just not slow down in those final 20 miles, I'll actually be all right. Because like you say, somewhere between 4 or 5 miles an hour sounds quite manageable. And then as long as the wheels don't fall off.
You want to be picking people off, don't you? You want to be starting slow and just letting them drift off. You don't want to be overtaken by a banana on the, say, mile 85 or something, or someone doing a freak.
I did an ultra, funnily enough, I did an ultra in Snowdonia last weekend, and next year I've signed up to a longer distance version of it, so I will be running through the night in Snowdonia. But I did the same race the year before. The final 5 miles is all downhill, and I just got my race strategy all wrong. It was my first ultra, so I wasn't as well conditioned as I am now. I was literally hobbling and sidestepping down that final descent because my quads were completely blown. This year, I got to the final summit. I was like, I feel good. I'm gonna just see how fast I can run. flew down this hill. I clocked my watch at some point running sub 6 minute miles. And I actually got goosebumps at the time, reflecting a year ago I was sidestepping and now I'm running a sub 6 minute mile. And on your point there, I was picking people off whose quads are blown, and I was like, I was that guy. I was that guy last year. And with hopefully better conditioning, better race strategy, better nutrition, I, at least in shorter races, I've now been able to sustain a good pace throughout the race. And whether that carries over to 100 miles, we'll find out in a couple of weeks. But there's lots to think about.
I was just going to ask, what was I going to ask? I had a question. One thing I want to ask in a minute is about nutrition and things. Oh, that was it. Logistically, so if you're doing it in a couple of weeks, it's going to be in June. So it's kind of like the longest days of daylight that we have in this country. So is it a very, very early start so that you can get off and have, the most possible of the race in daylight? Is that going to make sense?
Yep, it starts at 6 a.m. and so I'll probably be finishing just as the light is coming up, which will be quite cool. Just as the deep black of the night is turning into that kind of purpley, like the sun is coming soon. So that's when I'm in the dark of the night, that's what I'm going to keep telling myself. Just, has the light come up? No, we'll keep moving. Just keep moving. You're moving towards the sun.
Yeah. So in a couple of weeks, so in a couple of weeks, you probably, if you start at 6 a.m., it's light till it's going to be near to 10 p.m., isn't it? When it's light. So you've got it's amazing to think you'll be running for that whole time. But and then, like you said, the fact
when I'm going to bed,
the start, the finish,
when I'm going to bed after a long day at work, and I'm an early bird, so I like waking up early, but I like going to bed early. I'll be tired at 9 p.m. and I'm going to bed going, oh, I'm tired. And then I think I'd have only done 60 miles by this point. So when I'm going to bed feeling tired, I have this thought like, oh my God, I would have so far to run at this point.
You mentioned briefly nutrition. How do you, we're going to start wrapping up in 5 or so minutes, but what does that look like leading up to the event, and then through the 24, 25, through that full day of running? What does that look like?
So just in general, I find that I recover better when I'm eating well. I need to eat a lot of calories. So I don't use MyFitnessPal or anything, but I'm feeling like it's probably roughly 3,500 to 4,000 calories is when I feel good per day. And then I try and keep it as whole food as I can. I'm not following a specific model because I just need to get the calories in, but I try to keep it as whole food as possible and try to minimize sugar and minimize processed foods. And I definitely feel that helps my recovery. That's just generally how I'm eating at the moment. And in the race, all of that goes out the window, and you can eat absolute crap during the race. I try to have about 350 to 400 calories an hour, which there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of science in this, but what is happening is people are just sharing information. So I'm just following different people on Instagram and through podcasts, and just through sharing information, people are finding that somewhere between 300 and 400 calories an hour, depending on how fast you're running, depending on the terrain, that seems to be about right. And I make that up with a combination of gels. I use a brand called Tailwind, which is a powder that I put in my water, and so that's a calorie and electrolyte drink, and then just real food, which is generally just crap, just soft bakes and flapjacks and brownies and various bits. And then there are aid stations dotted through the race, so then I'll kind of top up my fluids, take a few bars, and have some actual other real food at aid stations.
So do you kind of carry most of the stuff that I know you said there's aid stations, but would you have like you've probably got like a Camelback type thing, have you? And
yep.
you carry some like you say, real foods, like maybe, I don't know, bananas and flapjacks and things like that in your backpack with you as you're doing the race, do you?
Yeah. So I'll carry obviously I've never run 100 miles where it's going to take me 22 hours, but my longest races, I've done a few races that are about the 10-hour mark. So I carry kind of a baseline a level of nutrition for every hour. And then if I can top up with stuff that I like and helps me, then that's great. But if there's nothing I like, then that's okay. I've got myself covered. So 22 hours might be a bit tricky, but I'll figure it out. I'll carry at least a good base level of nutrition.
And like you say, you can probably pick up stuff at the aid stations as and when you're passing and things. And I suppose the only other thing is just, I know just from even just a normal marathon distance is just making sure that you're not going to get any sort of, GI stress and upset stomach and that sort of thing from if you're going to be taking lots of gels and lots of things you're not used to. So you probably would have trained with these things and know how your body reacts to them and things. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And that's partly why I've done the race in Snowdonia. That was a training race, which is so cool because a year ago, that was the race that blew me up and was at my absolute limit. And now the same race is a training run and I feel completely fine from it. And so that was a training race, and it was training to keep my legs strong and to give me a good metabolic stimulus, but also to practice my nutrition and practice race strategy, practice my pacing. So I've been using races and to practice all that stuff. You need to have tested your nutrition just as much as you need to have trained your legs for running.
Yeah. Wow, this is incredible. I'll tell you what, we're definitely gonna have to speak to you again, Chris, because there was loads of things I wanted to talk to you about, and we've obviously taken a deep dive into this, which is fantastic. So it's been really, really interesting and just really interesting. And definitely we'll have to get you back on after the 100 miles.
I'd happily do that. We'll have a part 2. We'll spend a bit of time chatting about the ultra, because I'm intrigued. I'm as intrigued as anyone how this is going to go. It's great doing something where you actually don't know what the outcome's going to be. So we'll chat about that and anything else.
And then because I want to talk to you about the ice baths and things you've been doing, and your general. And I know you were doing like BJJ as well and things like that. Yeah, loads of stuff we can talk about. But this has been it's been really interesting because it's kind of captured. It's captured my imagination, the way you talk about it, and with Phil Maffetone coming back on, and we're talking about Born to Run as well. It's really, and the book I'm reading at the moment from Chris McDougall. It's been a great conversation. I mean that's not what I expected today, but it was fascinating. It was fascinating. We'll start to wrap up. Pete, have you got anything? I know I've seen you making notes and things, I think, as we've been talking and things. Have you anything you want to kind of ask or say?
I had loads of questions, but not that we're going to go into now. One of them was about what do you do when it does get dark? Because I've done some long walks in my time. Not done it. I don't do running. I'm not into running, and I've found this fascinating. That's how good it is. Because I do find it fascinating just find out what the body can do, and it was just. I mean, we're going to talk about it next time, but it's just I'm just making a mental note of it because I know when it gets dark, your body just wants to go to sleep, right? So it's like.
That's the mental struggle. That's not the physical struggle. That's the mental struggle.
Yeah, because your circadian rhythm's just like sleep. It's time for sleep. It's dark. Go to sleep. So
mine in particular, I really am an early bird, and that will be a struggle for me.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that next time. We'll give you a few weeks afterwards to recover. That was brilliant. That was fascinating.
Yeah, Paul. Anything while we wrap up?
I think Chris's childhood training program is actually not far removed from a kind of training program that would turn you into a superhuman superhero. I don't know if any of you've seen One Punch Man. One Punch Man is a manga cartoon. It's brilliant. It's about a man who is indestructible, and he's so bored by life because it doesn't matter who goes up against him, he can kill them with one punch. So throughout the entire series, he's obviously just defeating a variety of different massive mega monsters. I think you can see it on Netflix. Anyway, so people in the end are asking him what his training plan is, which is 100 sit-ups, 100 press-ups, 100 squats, and a 10K run. And that's how he became undefeatable. So I think your training plan wasn't far off.
Yeah, nice. I like it. If only I'd kept up with 100 press-ups a day.
Exactly. Might be indestructible by now.
Yeah,
that's all right. Hang on, you can do 100 press-ups. It's just 1 mile, isn't it? That'd be dead easy.
Yeah. I do have a YouTube channel, and I'll be making a video about it. That would add an extra piece of interest to the video, wouldn't it? If I did a press up every mile.
Yeah, that's a good training.
Yeah, that's a good. So you just mentioned, Chris, your YouTube channel. I mean, literally, hopefully, I think people will be interested after listening to this. And like I say, we will have you back on, and we will kind of unpack the event after it's happened. But if people want to follow you, your YouTube, and like I said, your Instagram, I love. I love the way you run, and you're kind of, you talk obviously to the camera as you're running through.
It's because I'm in zone 2.
Yeah, because you're in zone 2. Yeah, you can talk holding a camera, and it's lovely seeing you run. It's actually very it looks very easy, and it's very peaceful, and it is very easy for you. I know, but it looks very easy. It's very peaceful. It's very serene, which is great. But yeah, so how's best for people to see what you're doing and follow you?
It would be Instagram and YouTube, I guess. So Instagram is at Chris_Branch_, and YouTube is Chris Branch. Just type in Chris Branch and you'll find me.
Excellent. And I know, obviously, we haven't really talked about it. We touched on it at the start, but your clinic in Chelmsford, Forte Physical Health. If people happen to be local, or people want to see what you do there, do you have a separate kind of account and things for the business as well?
The best place to find out more would be our website, which is fortephysicalhealth.co.uk. And yeah, we're centrally based in Chelmsford, and hopefully help people get back to living good, active lives, pain-free.
Excellent. And then I suppose they'll obviously, if people follow you on Instagram and find your YouTube channel, there'll be links to things. They'll be able to see things. But no, that's been really interesting. And that's, like I say, it wasn't the I don't really know what I was expecting coming into the conversation, but it was a real interesting deep dive into this event that's coming up. And I really look forward to catching up with you in a few weeks. So thank you so much for coming on, Chris.
Not at all. I had a great time as well. I love not knowing where a conversation is going to go, but broadly speaking about health, this is kind of one of my favorite hobbies. So it was great fun.
Brilliant. So thank you very much to Peter, to Paul, and of course to Chris for coming on this week. Thank you to all of you for listening. We have, like I say, we're entering a run of guests coming up over the next few weeks, and we will definitely make sure that we get Chris on. If the event is in a couple of weeks, probably in the next kind of month or so, we'll probably try and catch up with Chris again for another episode. And as Paul said, he's lining up Phil Maffetone to come back on at some stage in the next few episodes as well, which will be great. So thank you all for listening. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're listening or watching on a platform that allows you to do so. Please also follow us on Instagram, and what do they do? Subscribe, I think, on YouTube. Find us on there, and we will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.